Welcome to this episode of Let's Be Civil. My guest today on Let's Be Civil is Evan Humphries. Evan Humphries is a research associate in the civil engineering program at Texas State University. She has worked on several domestic and international aviation pavement projects. Her current role explores the use of technology to improve transportation system performance. Okay, welcome everybody to another edition of Let's Be Civil podcast, civil engineering podcast, and we have another of our civil engineering guests, but maybe, I don't know, Evan, are you a civil engineer by association since you hang around with us so much?
I consider myself a translator. I speak both civil engineering and...
Okay. So somewhere along the line, we'll create an artificial entity and we'll identify you as an honorary civil engineer of some,
transportation.
Well, no, I was going to say an honorary civil engineer of something university, so a school that doesn't actually exist.
I like that.
But we'll have a ceremony and you can give a speech and all that kind of good stuff. So, but yeah, so Evan is someone that is not a civil engineer, but works in that arena, or worked, I should say, in that arena quite a bit, and in a way that is, it's not like it's it was a unique job, but one that it's pretty much, I would say, behind the scenes. Would you agree? Before you give us a little bit of insight and background, is this kind of like a behind the scenes role that you played?
I agree. I was part of the group that made the projects happen.
Okay. So why don't you step further back, because of not, being a non-civil, to kind of what is your background, and then we'll talk about what you did.
Okay, so I actually started out, I got a master's in organizational communication, which is a lot of presentations and report writing, proposals, things like that. And so when I graduated into the 2009 recession, which was a fun thing, and that actually plays a part in the international shipping stuff that I'll get to later. But the company that I went to work for was an airport pavement maintenance company. And so they did pavement work on the airfield operations side of airports. So the parts of airports where planes landed and took off, where cargo was moved around, that kind of stuff. Not the typical air side where people go into the terminal and wait. So there's a lot of engineering that goes on that side of the airfield, to make sure that planes don't run into each other and that it's safe for planes to land and things like that. So I actually went to work for them as they were looking to expand internationally. I have some background in Spanish, so I worked mostly with the president of the company and with the executive vice president that was based in Ecuador, working on international projects. And we worked on projects literally all over the world.
And then you left them to come to the university setting.
I did. I left them. There was just so many different ways I could tell that things could improve. And in companies that are trying to kind of, stay afloat through recessions, they're not looking to invest money in new technology improvements. And so I saw the opportunity to go to Texas State and actually work on the research side of things and develop new methods and new processes that could ultimately lead to improvements in the private arena. And that's why I made that jump.
Yeah. So what we're going to talk, so today you work at Texas State.
Yeah,
and full disclosure, you and I work together on research related to smart infrastructure and technologies. But I have you on today because we want to talk about that international shipping component. And if you have international projects, how do you actually make those projects happen? Because stuff has to get, and actually shipping is true within the US as well, but there's an element to being international shipping. So, I mean, you could talk to shipping, within the US too. but the international shipping just adds a whole layer of activity. And we've had a couple international shipping issues develop within the program, which kind of sparked the idea for this. So why don't you give us, I'm sure that there's a lot that you can say, but maybe sort of an overview of what's involved if you're going to ship equipment or materials for a construction project overseas.
So I will preface this by saying that the company that I worked for before, I shipped equipment of all sizes. I shipped, things that could fit in small boxes, that could be in a container, that could go overseas. I shipped totes of liquid, paint, asphalt sealer, runway rinsing detergent is the best way I can describe it. And as for the asphalt sealer, that's actually a hazardous material. So while I was working at that company, I had to get certified to ship hazardous materials via ground, air, rail, and water. So I had 3 different certifications to ship stuff, because on any one single shipping paper here in the United States, when you send something from point A to point B, you have what's called a bill of lading. You have the same thing for international shipments. And any error on a bill of lading, including forgetting to cross a T or dot an I, starts at a $1,000 fine. So it's very much a detail-oriented profession that requires a lot of training to get into. So just knowing that I had to go through all that, yeah, we shipped little equipment. We shipped 250 to 330 gallon isototes of liquid material, everything all the way up to semi-truck sized equipment. We had proprietary equipment called water blasters that we had built in-house at that company that was literally a semi-truck front and then a 40 to 53 foot trailer on the back that had engines and water tanks and pumps and hoses and just all kinds of stuff on it that we would have to get from one place to another. I mean, we had projects in Ecuador, in Dominican Republic, in Doha, Qatar, in Saudi Arabia, and Puerto Rico, Bolivia. We had projects all over the world that we had to get things of various sizes and classifications to.
So from a size perspective, does it matter? Does the size impact or make the job easier or harder as depending on that? And I'll just kind of lay it out there for you: liquids versus solids, equipment versus materials. I mean, how do those things make the process harder or easier for shipping?
So this is actually where that starting to do this in a recession stuff comes in. When the 2008-2009 recession hit, they actually cut the amount of global container ships and shipping vessels that were making the rounds to the various ports by 25%, right? So all of a sudden you only had 3 out of 4 available spots that you used to have. In terms of size, most of those vessels are container ships, and you can see, you can Google pictures of container ships and see these things that are just stacked so high with all these containers. When you're talking about shipping something that won't fit in a container, something like a semi-truck sized piece of equipment, it has to go under deck in what's called dry dock. And there are size limits to what you can put in dry dock. And there are fewer spaces, it's more expensive, and it's also not as protected from the elements as if you're shipping something that's covered. And we actually had an issue with that when we shipped one of our water blasters dry dock to Ecuador, because it started in Port of Houston and it had to go all the way down through Panama Canal and hook back around to Guayaquil in Ecuador. And it took a few months. And in those few months, that piece of equipment was exposed to salt water. And all the wiring, all the electrical that was involved with that equipment had to be replaced when we actually got it to Ecuador, which was expensive in and of itself.
Right. Do you remember sort of either a percentage or a dollar amount?
It was thousands of dollars. Thousands of dollars, yeah. And because we had built it, because it was a proprietary piece of equipment, we had to send our people down there to find the materials to fix it. We couldn't just send it to a mechanic shop, Right.
So what about, like the hazardous waste stuff? I mean, obviously it's going to be more involved, but when you throw the international layer on top of it, how much more involved is it now than just maybe like a gallon of water or a normal gallon of paint from you know, from a home improvement store or
I
something.
shipped containers of Sherwin-Williams paints and had
Oh
no
wow,
problems, right? I mean, it's a standard material. Everybody knows who Sherwin-Williams is.
right,
People in customs are going, oh, okay, we get what this is for. But when you start sending, containers full of asphalt sealer, then they start going, wait, what is this?
right,
Um,
and they
it-
don't know.
exactly, they
Right.
don't know. And so those are a little bit more difficult. So the whole international trade system operates on what's called the harmonized code. And there's an international trade commission that basically exists to say every item, everything that gets shipped from, a child's toy to a large piece of equipment, construction equipment or whatever, has a specific code that is recognized by every country, and that is what the tax rate is based on.
Yeah.
So, and that in weight. So when you're shipping things like vehicles, hazardous materials, textiles, those are all very sensitive objects to ship because a lot of companies have those as their main export. So when you're trying to import it into the country, they go, whoa, 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 whoa. Why are you trying to import something that we export? You have to pay a really good amount of money to get it in the country.
Gotcha.
And I made that mistake also with the shipment to Ecuador. We shipped about it was a box of 20 or 25 t-shirts. They were the crew work shirts. They had, the company logo on them. They were safety yellow, safety orange, safety green so that they could be seen. But because we had put them on the customs declaration as t-shirts and as textiles, the entire shipment got held up for about 4 weeks while we negotiated with them on bringing in those 20 t-shirts.
So how long would some of this take from, I don't know, where do you start the clock ticking? I guess the clock stops ticking when whatever you're shipping arrives. But, when you consider the prepping all the paperwork that you had to do, and also then it's just having to travel to get to where, I mean, what kind of window are you talking about with some of this stuff?
So the project that we were working on the new international airport in Doha, Qatar, which was the brand new airport that the Emiri was building for himself and for the country, but he had his own private gate there. I believe we signed that contract in April of whatever year it was. We went into planning the rest of that year. I actually flew to New York and I spent November, December, and January in upstate New York packing the containers to take to the port of New York so that they could ship out to Doha. So it took 3 months just to pack the containers for shipping. Then we had to get it to the port, which was, about a day's worth of driving.
Right.
And then once it was on the ship, I believe it was a 5 to 6 month wait for it to get from New York all the way to where it needed to be in Doha. I mean, you're talking about halfway around the world, and they stop at multiple ports of call to unload and reload cargo. It's not just a direct route.
So it's a little bit like a Greyhound bus, or kind of a thing where
exactly
people get on and get off, and so you got cargo that's getting on and getting off as it travels.
And to that point, I mean, you have a contract, right? I mean, because you don't actually start preparing for this stuff until you have a written contract, and the contract has a start date on it, and a finish date. Usually it says, you'll be done in this amount of time. And so once that contract gets signed, it becomes a mad scramble to get all of the materials picked, how much of it you need. I mean, I think I sent 16 containers of just paint alone for the terminal. So, we're talking dozens of shipments to manage. So you've got the equipment, you've got the material, you've got people. I mean, if you're sending crews of people over there to do the work visas are a huge deal in other countries. You can't just, show up and go, oh, I'm, here to work in your country for a few months and, don't mind me. There's definitely fees and paperwork associated with that. And the other thing about that too, because I mean, you hate to say international shipping of people because that sounds bad, but realistically, you have to be careful because there are certain countries who will or won't let certain people in. For example, we had an office in Canada and we did a bunch of regular work in Canada. And we had people here in the United States who had, you know, DWIs from years back or whatever. And a DWI is it's a fairly common thing here, but if you have one in Canada, they won't allow you into work. If you've got a criminal record, they go, no, you know? So that also happened to us internationally. We did a lot of work on airfield bases. We would go do like bases in Central America. And if you don't have the credentials to clear getting onto a military base, then you can't go. So, you know, it's all kinds of stuff that you have to actually consider when you're talking about doing work in other countries.
So how long would it take to get the paperwork together to just do that piece of it?
So what we did, and I would recommend this to anyone who finds themselves dealing with this situation, is we hired a customs broker. I actually had 2 customs brokers that I worked with on a regular basis. One of them specifically handled the liquid and hazardous shipments, and the other one handled the solid and material and the solid and equipment shipments. So I had people that had expertise in both areas. And working with them made the process a lot smoother because they could tell you, okay, I need this by this date, I need this by this date, you know, I need you to find this information. The first shipment that I did was just 2 containers to Honduras for a demo, and one container was material and the other container was equipment. And I want to say it probably took about a month and a half to get the paperwork together for that. But once that paperwork was together, I had a lot of information for future shipments, and I was able to refer back. And so the more shipments that I did, the more paperwork I had to refer back to, so that it took less time, and it took less time finding the information that I needed. One of the things that we used to do was, for any job that we had in another country, we would buy a shipping container, just a standard, you know, shipping container, cost, you know, $1,500 to $2,000. We'd take it up to the shop, either the one that we had here in Texas or the one in New York, and we would have the guys in the shop convert it to a work trailer. And then we would pack that work trailer with all of the supplies that they might need, filters and, you know, couplings and wires and cleaning supplies and just whatever it would be. And we would ship everything extra that would could technically be a problem down in that one container. That way, if everything else got let go, they could at least, and we had to deal with getting that one container cleared, they could at least start with everything else. And sometimes it was the equipment. We had a job in Dominican Republic. We were supposed to be there for a week. That was how long it was going to take to just do the work. But because they wouldn't clear our water blaster for 4 days, we had to actually go down to the port. And ports are not exactly fun or clean places to go. They're very dirty, and there's a lot going on. And we had to actually go down there a couple days in a row and sit and talk to people and show them pictures and, you know, direct them to resources online to help them understand what it was we were trying to bring into their country, because they didn't want to let us bring it in. So there's a lot of persuasion that goes along with international shipping as well.
So these brokers that you have, it kind of sounds like having a tax accountant or something like that. So because as time went by, you could do more of it as you learn, but it's a complex thing that you really need somebody who's really dedicated to understanding all the rules and the ins and outs of it.
And as with anyone who does any job for any length of time, the longer that they do it, the more they learn little tricks. And, oh, if you do this way, then it happens more quickly. Or this is actually the way that this works. Even though it says that it works this way, if you do it this way, it gets going a little faster. So they're really handy to have around. And the other thing that they have that most people don't have just in general is they've got access to all of the shipping lines and schedules and quantity. So they can tell if a ship has room or if it doesn't. And so they can actually help you determine, oh, okay, you need to have everything there in 6 months, then you need to have everything to the port, you know, 4 months in advance.
Right.
So they're very helpful in terms of scheduling things and just making sure that you have all your ducks in a row.
Well, I'd ask you questions about the shady side of international shipping, but we'll pass. on that. You don't need to have this, somebody watch this and then you get a call about something. But it sounds like there's, that, you know, with your comments about the being down at the dock, that not everything there may be on the up and up.
It's not just the dock. I mean, it's because there are taxes involved with importing items. Whoever you're working with in a country, you really need to make sure that you keep an eye on paperwork and make sure that the paperwork that you have in your office matches up with the paperwork that they have in theirs. And that goes for everybody. It's just so there is something that I actually took a class before I really started getting into the importing and exporting stuff called Export New York, and I took it up at the Whitman School of Management at Syracuse University. And it was a 9-month class, and it covered 4 major areas of exporting. And one of the areas that it covered was legal. And one of the issues that we talked about was the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. And that is something that anybody that's involved in any international work should be aware of, because it can take the form of falsified paperwork, of bribery to get contracts in other countries.
Right.
You know, there's a whole number of areas that become gray. You know, you like to think that negotiations are always on the up and up, but in my experience, in countries where there isn't as much government oversight as there is here in the United States, you have to be really careful to listen for the language that they use and know how to respond to it, because it can get dicey.
Yeah, yeah. Sounds fascinating. There's got to be either a TV show or a movie or something floating around in all of this.
I mean, I've got stories, but like you said, I don't want to.
Right, don't want to share them. That's right. So in the time we have left, you have an interesting, I don't know if you say hobby, but an activity that is hydroponics.
Yeah, aquaponics. Yeah.
Aquaponics, yeah.
So we like to garden, and this is Texas, and so rain isn't exactly abundant. And one of the things that, you know, gardens take is a lot of water. And so we started doing some research a few years ago, and into you know, hydroponics and aquaponics, and actually the reason that we went towards aquaponics rather than hydroponics was because with hydroponics you have to buy the fertilizers, and you know, you basically fertilize the plants and you keep it on a schedule. With aquaponics you use fish. So we have currently a 100-gallon tank out in our backyard that's got about 20 to 25 goldfish in it, and there's a tray on top that has a clay rock medium in it, and right now we've actually got tomatoes and garlic growing, and there's a pump in the tank that actually pumps the dirty fish water up into the tray where it waters the roots of the plants that are growing, and then there's a hole in the other end where the clean water, the filtered water, flows back down into the tank. So it serves several purposes in that it's self-cleaning, it grows plants, it's self-watering. A couple years ago, we had one where we did tilapia, and you can actually eat the tilapia.
Right.
So we've actually looked at, you know, doing this as a project for food deserts, places where, you know, there's not a lot of access to fresh vegetables and things like that. And there are some commercially available units, but they can be kind of complicated. So I think that'd be really cool. I think that'd be a really cool project to take.
So you guys developed this yourselves?
Yeah, through lots of trial and error, we built our setup.
Right. This is not a kit or anything
No,
like that.
no.
You pulled the pieces together and made it work yourselves.
Yeah, we got the tank at Tractor Supply, and we built the stand for the tray, and we got the tray at a specialty store. We got the pump at Lowe's. You know, we just kind of cobbled it together, and this is our 3rd one that we've built, and so we had a little bit of, you know, experience. We had
you recently moved. So did you take the unit that you had at your other place, or did you start over, or are you not doing it there?
We started over.
You
Because
started.
at the other house, we had a 125-gallon tank and a 55-gallon tank, and those were buried. We had buried them in the ground for temperature
Okay.
control. But when we moved, we decided we we didn't think we wanted to do aquaponics. We thought the backyard's a little smaller. It's a lot of work. We'll have other stuff to work on. But about a month or two after we moved in, we realized that we really missed it, and so we went and bought a new tank and got a new pump and kind of reset up this setup so that.
So what are all the different kinds of things that you've grown? And
Whew.
we'll stay away from the illegal stuff here too.
None of that. None of that.
Yeah.
We've done tomatoes, several different kinds of tomatoes, lots of different kinds of tomatoes, cherry tomatoes and Roma tomatoes and heirloom tomatoes. We've done bell peppers, all different kinds of bell peppers. We've got garlic. We actually use it. We found that it's a really good starter process. So we really like kale, leafy greens, and things like that. I know that you're not a huge fan.
Not for the kale stuff, but
But like for instance, last October we started some kale seeds in there, and we let them get to be about 6 to 10 inches tall. And then when the weather was nice out front here, we actually have a garden out in our front yard. We transplanted them, and there's still a couple of them that are still going, which is amazing in this heat. But they were producing kale for us for 6 months. So
well, because I actually, it's funny that you mentioned the other garden stuff, because I was going to say this isn't all that you do in terms of like gardening. You guys actually, so how large is your, because it's a raised bed, right?
it's about, I want to say about 10 feet by 25 feet. It's a pretty big.
Pretty big, yeah.
Yeah, we've
Yep.
got an olive tree in there, and we've got all kinds of flowers and herbs, and we put a bird bath in there, a little solar-powered bird bath that the birds don't seem to like, but there's an owl that lives nearby that really seems to like it. So I'm okay with that. But one of the other things that we do, kind of in line with all that, is we built a compost bin out of some stuff that we had lying around, and so we take all of our household waste, all of our
Right.
fruits and veggies and bread and all that, and we put it in the bin out back, and we collect the compost tea that forms, and then we use the compost tea on the garden out front, so that helps propagate that, and then we
Right.
can trim the plants out front and put it back in the compost and let it just refeed itself. So it's a system, it's a whole system that we have for planting and gardening and growing. And
The one thing you lost though were the fruit trees. You had plum trees in the front yard. You don't have any fruit trees on this property, right?
just the olive tree right now, and it's a baby, so it's only got about 7 olives on it, but hopefully in the future it'll have more. I did actually bring up to Cade planting a new tree in the backyard, maybe a peach tree, because those are self-pollinating. You don't have to have 2 of them. At the house in San Marcos, we had the 2 plum trees because you have to have 2 so that they can cross-pollinate. Those were some good plums. I miss those plums.
I do too. I had a big bag of them one time, as I recall.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we are basically out of time here because we were chit-chatting a little too much beforehand offline. But I want to thank you for being a part of the podcast. The shipping side of things is so behind the scenes that if you drive by a project, there's vehicles there. They just show up as the contractor mobilizes, and then one day they're gone. And unless you happen to be around when they get picked up or dropped off, you don't ever see anything that doesn't cross your mind.
Yeah.
And so there's it's a significant part of the work. I mean, if you don't get the materials and the supplies and the equipment and people on site, nothing's going to happen.
And sometimes you can get what you think is the right equipment on site, and the site conditions are such that you go, oh no, this isn't right, and you have to start all over again.
Right. And we have been learning, watch your eyes and dotting your I's and crossing your T's, because if you don't pay close attention, then stuff can happen, and it adds to the duration before something shows up or before somebody finds it.
Yep.
So, yeah, we're learning some stuff firsthand now, aren't we?
Yep. I did not realize that my knowledge of Incoterms from 10 years ago would actually be useful,
Well, I'm glad for the collective we of civil engineering at Texas State that you're here to help us out right now. So, okay. So have a good rest of the day. Good seeing you.
You too.
Thanks for being a part of the podcast.
No problem. Look
Take it
forward to it.
easy. Yep.
See you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye.